Campus protests and politics, the topic on the minds of many as demonstrations move from Columbia to City College to NYU and to who knows how many other places in the tri-state area. The Point starts right now. New Jersey Congressman Josh Gottheimer always has a lot on his mind. But instead of his favorite cause, which we already know is congestion pricing, we're going to start with another issue, the protests on college campuses here, and whether anti-Zionism can be interpreted as anti-Semitism. Your thoughts on that?
Well, first, thank you so much for having me. And let me be clear, I'm a big believer that we should be able to speak out and have civil discourse and debate. That's what's great about college campuses. We do it in Congress as well. But there's a difference between that and, of course, violence and destruction and taking over college halls and destroying property, as the president talked about yesterday, and peaceful debate. And there's a big difference between screaming anti-Semitic and hurling anti-Semitic slurs at people and calling for the death of Zionists and Jews and supporting Hamas, a known terrorist organization, and encouraging them versus constructive discourse and debate.
So you think that what happened at Columbia University was over the edge?
I think across the line, first of all, it's all about campus safety, making sure students can be safe on campus, regardless of their background, regardless of their religion. That's the #1 thing. And you want to make sure there's no hate on college campuses. And of course, you want to make sure that students can learn, right? That they can go to school, they can go to the library, they can take exams and graduate, right? And I think we shouldn't lose sight of that's the goal of a university. And
so
what crosses the line.
Right? Was the NYPD right to go in and do what it did at Columbia?
I think given the fact that outsiders had come and helped take over a building, that there was violence, that they threw campus security out, and that safety was at risk of students, yes, NYPD was right. It was the right thing to do given the circumstances. And right, we should always allow debate and discourse. And even when people disagree, it's okay. That's what we have. But when you cross the line, and what's happened at several of these universities, that's when you have to act.
So here's the question. So do you think that it has devolved into what some people have called Jew hate? And I know that you've introduced a number of bills in Congress to do something about that.
We passed a bipartisan bill overwhelmingly in Congress, supported by Hakeem Jeffries, our leader, and so many Democrats and Republicans.
And Republicans.
Yes, Democrats and Republicans. Mike Lawler and I wrote this bill together. And the legislation is very clear. It says, listen, it helps define what anti-Semitism is for the purpose of discrimination on college campuses, and says there's no discrimination allowed on college campuses, and this is how you define anti-Semitism. And it's nothing controversial about it. It's a pretty simple piece of legislation.
But here's the thing. So the president finally spoke out this week about what's going on college campuses. He said that protest is fine, but you can't devolve into violence and you can't devolve into anti-Semitic speech.
Right. He said violent protest is not protected, peaceful protest is. Right.
But he also said he was against anti-Semitism.
Yes.
He also said he's not going to change his position on supporting Israel, and he also said you shouldn't call in the National Guard. However, having said that, there seems to be a lack of faith in the president on the part of college students who are participating in the protest. And I wonder, from your point of view, is there a concern on the part of Democrats that these college students will no longer support President Biden, might vote for a third-party candidate or the Republican candidate because of what's happened in the protests?
No, I'm not worried about that. I mean, I think the president spoke out clearly against hate. As you pointed out, he said, whether it's anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, or discrimination against Arab Americans or Palestinian Americans, there's no place for hate speech or violence. And I think that's actually universally accepted. You're going to have, listen, college students you're always going to have some disagreement. But I met with a group of Jewish students just last week who said they're scared to go to campus. They don't feel safe. And when people see what's going on these college campuses, they just want to be able to get an education. So I actually think this is backfiring on some of these protesters who are going out and supporting Hamas, a foreign terrorist organization that has killed Americans and continues to hold Americans hostage.
But I think what we need to talk about is the political ramifications.
No, I get where you're going on that.
Of what's going on. And, you know, this is going to be a hotly contested presidential election. So is there a concern that students who don't agree with what the president's done in the Middle East, the people who are protesting on college campuses right now, will stay home or not vote for, or vote for somebody else?
No, I'm not worried about that. I think it's a very small number of people who agree with the violent steps that some of these college students are taking. You've got plenty of other college students who say, this is not acceptable, right? And I've heard from plenty of them, Jewish and non-Jewish, right, who've said this is not the way that we have these debates on college campuses, and who understand the importance of getting humanitarian aid into Gaza and making sure that happens, but also the importance of getting hostages home and not supporting a terrorist organization that's killed Americans. I don't think most Americans, young people as well, say, oh yeah, we should do anything to support an organization, a terrorist organization that has killed Americans and continues to fire and kill at Americans and our service members.
So now we have a situation where the NYPD has arrested 382 people at both Columbia and City University. The question is, what should happen to the people who were arrested? What should the Manhattan District Attorney do? Should he give them a desk appearance ticket and let them go on their way? Or should they charge them, especially the people who took over Hamilton Hall, with stronger charges, the burglary and the intent to hurt? That could be felony charges and could leave them with a record that could follow them through their professional life. What's the right thing to do?
I'll leave that to the prosecutors to make that decision, because that's New York law. But I'll tell you this. There's a huge difference between speaking out and protesting and letting your views be heard, which I'm a huge supporter of in this country. It's a great part of our First Amendment. And there's another difference between actually violence and destruction of property. And I'm sure that's what the prosecutors will look at. And I think, there's codes of conduct on these universities. You can't threaten, harass, and intimidate other students and scream hate speech at them and cause them to not be able to get an education. And I think these are complicated issues. I want to make sure that we let students actually speak out and speak their mind, even when I don't agree with them. But when you go to violence and destruction of property, it's a different set of circumstances.
Jews across the country celebrated Passover recently, which is a holiday that talks about the freedom from oppression. And I think on a lot of Seder plates, Seder conversations, the question was, are we now the oppressed yet again? And I wonder what your thoughts are about what's happening in this country, which seems to have an anti-Israeli bent and caused by what's going on in the Middle East. Is it a legitimate fear that Jews have now of more oppression, more Jew hate?
Well, I think when you see what's going on in some of these college campuses and what people are screaming, pro-Hamas, this should happen, October 7th should have 10,000 more times, kill the Zionists, go back to Poland. When you see rhetoric like that being used, you can understand why a lot of Jewish people in our country are scared and why students on college campuses don't feel safe. I want every student, regardless of their background, to feel safe. I want every American to stand up against hate. I don't think this is a partisan issue remotely. And I think, frankly, that's what we need to move toward. It's what the president has spoken about, I think, pretty clearly. It's what our leaders on both sides of the aisle have spoken about, and we need more of that in this country. We need more of coming together, not, putting aside hate and disagreement, and having constructive discourse. And I think if we do that, there's no reason in this country we can't win.
So there's another issue we need to talk about, and that's the president talking about the possibility of allowing refugees from Gaza to come here as asylum seekers. Your thoughts on that?
It's a really good question. I think there's a process, as you know, for asylum seekers, and I think we should run through that process. And so if people apply, and depending if they qualify for that process, we'll see what happens. I think we have to be very careful that only, as I feel, frankly, about all people who are wanting to come to our great country. You want to make sure the right people come, but here's the big takeaway, for me. And I'm very focused on our top enemies, Iran, Russia, China, and North Korea. You don't see people rushing to go into Russia or China. They want to come to the United States of America, the greatest country in the world. I think always it's got to be to make sure we have the right people come to our country who want to be here for the right reasons and to celebrate our great democracy. That's what our focus should always be.
So you didn't give me an answer. Is it a good idea or is it a bad idea?
I think there's a process for that, and I think you should run the process. We consider all refugees under a certain process, and that's the process we should consider.
We only have a few minutes left, but I want to talk to you about congestion pricing. I know it's your favorite topic. The MTA has decided that it's going to
we can make it not be my favorite topic if it just goes away.
You know what? You're trying. You're certainly trying. But the MTA is now trying to offer a fig leaf, an olive branch, to tell you that they're going to make money available for the environmental concerns of communities around the bridges and tunnels and any place else that could have environmental impact. Does that mollify you in any way?
Well, I mean, first of all, I think it's hilarious that they want to charge people to drive over from Jersey, whack them with $15 a day for a hardworking electrician or a nurse, and then throw a crumb back at Jersey, which, by the way, they have not been.
It's a crumb?
They've not been specific about any dollar. They won't tell you anything.
It's about $80 or $90 million.
No, if they've given you the number, they haven't given it to New Jersey or the governor yet. So there's been no specifics. But even if they were throwing a crumb at New Jersey, here's my core problem, right? And I was just talking to some of your folks who work here, right? The bottom line is it's hugely expensive to give people another $4,000 a year new tax on a hardworking person. They're not going to see any of that money. The money's not going to go to their pocket, and they're still going to have to fork out an additional $15 a day to come to New York on top of what they already pay to go over the bridge or through the tunnels, on top of parking and gas. And a lot of them have no mass transit options. You can't do that to hardworking people. It's just not right.
Okay,
and so, and John
Josh.
O'Lieber, I know he doesn't care because maybe he can afford it, but you know, and people south of 60th Street in New York can afford it. But hardworking folks in the outer boroughs in New York and Jersey, they can't afford this, and that's who we're fighting for.
Well, we're out of time, and I wish you luck in your campaign. We're going to have to leave it there for now, but we will be right back.